Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of the Ready to Go show. And today we're going to be all touchy-feely again. Yes, I know it's just been a couple of weeks since we talked about making emotional connections, and now we're going to be talking about empathy. You know what empathy is, right? I'll give you a definition. There we are. So, empathy is the ability to identify with and vicariously experience the thoughts, feelings, and attitudes of someone else. And if you're of a certain generation, it basically means, do you grok it? Do you understand fully how someone else feels, even maybe more than they do? Maybe people don't even know exactly how they feel about a particular thing, but because you're such an open person with such a high IQ that you understand this and you are able to actually predict what they're going to do, because people make decisions based on gut feelings, and sometimes they don't even know why they make a decision. So today is kind of like part 2 of that connecting emotionally with your clients, and we're going to discuss, is it really possible for companies to be empathetic, or are we just sort of, is that like bullshit? We talk about the human to human, people to people, and yet, since social media has been around, we've been talking about the opportunity to reach out and touch people. But we're still talking about the whole oxymoron of social and marketing, and maybe we're just trying to, I don't know, put rainbows and sparkle, as it were, Jess, around this whole business thing and trying to make people believe that it's more human, more personal. So we're going to go ahead and introduce our panel, and then we're going to get into the conversation. So, BL.
Good morning from New York City, where it's a beautiful, crisp fall day, and I was in Central Park with my dog this morning looking at the leaves and the trees, and it's just a beautiful, you can't believe it's November.
Oh, that's nice. How wonderful. I wish I were there. It's sunny, but it's very cold here. And Jess, you're telling me, oh, is it? Yeah. Jess, you're telling us in Boulder, you're supposed to get snow, but it didn't happen.
Boulder and colder rhyme, by the way. So, just so you guys, it is really cold here. It's not as cold as it could be, and we were supposed to get snow, but the snow went to Denver, and the snow went east a little bit into western Kansas, and missed us. So we're just kind of watching and bundled up and enjoying the briskness when we're outside, which we love to be outside even on cold days.
Okay, Scotty, how are things in Seattle?
Oh, it's a beautiful blustery day. It's 56 degrees right now, the high for the day, and forecasted winds of up to 50 miles an hour. So I couldn't be happier, as long as the power doesn't go up.
58 miles an hour?
Yeah, 50.
50 or 60, yeah. But we always get 50 or 60 mile an hour winds right around Thanksgiving. Yeah. So this is within profile.
But that's more than blustery.
Speaking of blustery, so let's talk. We're going to be talking now. We're going to be blustering.
You can empathize with me, right?
From our site, yes, and I do empathize with you guys, because our winter is coming really fast. So to repeat, the definition of empathy, is the ability to identify, and I think the important word here is vicariously. Living through someone else's experience, the thoughts, feelings, and attitudes of someone else. And I'm going to read something which I put in the event page from our friend Eli Fennell, who is an incredible mind. I just love following this guy because he really writes some really cool stuff. But he wrote this quote in a Google Plus post about another article talking about empathy, and he says, you need to know what the goals of the buyers really are and how those goals influence their needs over the course of the buying process. Well, we know that, right? I mean, that's about building business personas and knowing who your client is. He says this requires some empathy, the ability to understand not only the rational needs of the buyer, but also their emotional and otherwise non-rational motivators, if any. And I think, and what I took from that is that we have to kind of go beyond building client personas and taking data and digesting data to find out who our clients are, what they want, and all that. And that's very rational. That's taking algorithms and all that to try to figure out, was this person going to like this product? That's not empathy to me. Empathy is that you have to kind of put yourself in that buyer's place and look at it from their point of view, and do they connect, as we said in the last show, do they connect emotionally to that product or service? And that's kind of difficult to do. So I'm going to ask the panel to start off the conversation basically is, what does empathy in a business context look like? And who wants to start off? Give me an answer to that. Okay, Jess,
I'm
thank
happy
you.
to start.
Okay, you're saved by the bell, Jess. BL's taking it.
Well, as I was telling you in the green room, I used to run a company that handled complaints for consumers pre-internet, and I wrote hundreds of letters and got people, new refrigerators and cars and all kinds of things from companies. And my experience with all of those people is that I was sort of like a cross between a shrink and a lawyer, but cheaper and more effective. And my experience was that all people really wanted was for someone to say, I'm sorry that happened to you. Let's see how we can fix that. They just wanted to be heard. And over and over again, I heard nobody would listen to my complaint. And, and if they would listen, they wouldn't do anything about it. So people just want to be heard. But when you talk about a big company, are there minimum wage customer service people going to be empathetic? I think not.
That's an excellent point. You're right, because there's things factoring in that. First of all, their minimum wage. Are they really a stakeholder in the company? Do they really care, as opposed to just clocking in on their job? So maybe that's an issue.
That's a business culture thing. And what I was going to start with was empathy, the willingness to listen, the ability to hear without judgment is a big part of the culture, and it's a top-down. It really can't be a bubbling up effect. It has to start at the top. And I'm going to take, minimum wage out of it, because there are some amazing people that make minimum wage that do a great job, and they want to be there and they want to help, and you see that in their person versus somebody who is showing up to just punch a clock. And that comes down to, now we're getting into how all the different areas of business, whether it's HR, whether it's customer service, whether it's product development or design, user interface, what those mechanisms are to communicate with customers. Everybody's trying to bring in a piece of empathy from their own worldview, forgetting the most important piece, going back to what you said, Ray, in the sense that we've got to know who our customer is and what their worldview is and make sure what we're giving them matches.
Well, there's a missing piece of what you said, and that is that in a company like Zappos, where a person has the ability to say, I'm going to credit you for that sale, and I'm going to send you something else, or I'm going to make you a VIP, or whatever. If you don't give the people the power to make decisions, if they have to go to a supervisor to make a decision like, yes, you can have a refund, then I'm sorry, but empathy is not part of the formula.
Well, Bill, you've got someone like basically seconding your statement, and she's, and he's saying, this is John, is saying that's spot on. People want to know that you'll engage enough to listen to them. He's often found that that can be resolution enough for their complaint, and even because I've been in the situations where I have a complaint or I bring something back or I have a question, and you really do, and we talked about this, BL, you really do feel you're being condescended to. They just want to sort of get rid of you, so they'll give you whatever. Oh, here's a coupon. Or whatever, but they're not listening to my problem. They're basically processing me, as a troublesome client.
Well, I am a troublesome client, and last week
I find that very difficult to believe.
No. Had a big run-in with Yahoo. And here you have a company the size of Yahoo, and you can't get a human being on the phone. I didn't think that was a good thing. So what they're trained to do in big companies is they have to monitor 24/7 to identify that you might have a real problem, but then they try immediately to get you into a direct message situation rather than to have your complaint in public. My advice to anybody with a problem is don't go there. Keep your complaint in public. And, I went back and forth for almost an entire day until I found out that this is Yahoo. How many people work there? How many thousands? There are 5, count them, 5 people on what they call their customer concierge team who are there to handle the complaints that actually get escalated to the point where somebody really better do something. So, is that empathy? I don't think so.
So, so the question was, sorry, Jess, and then you can you jump right in here. The first question was, what does empathy in marketing look like? And evidently it doesn't look like that. So, Jess,
that's what I was going to swing right back around to that too, Ray, in the sense that we're talking about people that are having problems that get put in the news. What about all the companies that do have really great empathetic processes and interactions and approaches to the world, and we're not talking about them? And that's the part that I think is really Well, I lost my train of thought. It just kind of
Well,
floated
can you
away
give
in a
us an
bubble there.
example, Jess, of a company that's an empathetic company?
Chewy.com, where you can get my dog food. They answer their phone 24/7, and if you have any kind of problem, there's a lovely person on the other side of the phone who's truly apologetic about it and fixes it. You know, Zappos is another one.
I like
there are
Evernote's service. I like how they train their employees at White House Black Market. I mean, by the way, they have created a loyal customer out of me, and it's really hard to get me to be loyal to anything. So they've done a really good, and that's where it goes. When you're empathetic from the beginning, and you know what you want to do for a customer, and you know where your individual pain points are, so you can be on the lookout for what might be bubbling up before it becomes a full-out, blown-on mess, if you will, and you know how you uniquely provide a service to the people that you're giving your product to, I think that's a big, big part of it. And if we have products that actually solve something versus products that are community based or hopefully viral, whatever, social sharing type of situations, I think there's a difference between those two companies. You've got these people doing this social sharing, and it's like, that's a whole different ballgame because everybody's coming with their own definition of whatever it is to connect around a product versus I've got a product, I can solve your problem, and I know who you are and what you're about, and I know where the pain points in my business are, so I'm not hiding them or ignoring them.
You don't know who I am and what I'm about when I call with a problem. You really don't.
Well, hang on, you bought their product, so yes, they do. That's my thing. If a good you want to know who my favorite company is? My favorite company in terms of this. Can you guess? Can you guess?
Apple.
Yes, my favorite company is Apple. They think about what I want before I want it.
Yep, I was in the Apple store last week at the Genius Bar, and you know they just I had a 9:15 appointment. They saw me at 9:15. The guy did everything that had to be done, solved the problem, sent me on my merry way. It cost me not 1 cent. Because they want your products to work well.
Yeah.
They want you to be happy. They want you to come back. You know, I mean, they're not a perfect company by any means.
Nope.
Nobody is. But, oh, my God, you know, in the Soho store of Apple, they have 350 employees there, and those people don't work on commission. They're really there to help you. It's mind-blowing.
So, okay, let's take a step back from the customer service aspect of it, because Jess, you mentioned earlier, and I don't remember if it was in the green room or not, but that empathy, that kind of empathy, and Scott, I'm going to ask, maybe I'll ask you this, where does that come from? Because you know you can take training manuals and lessons about customer service, but to actually be an empathetic company, where does that come from? Where does it have to come from? That's a bit of a leading question, but I want to ask you if you know any companies like that, and you can maybe give an example.
So you're asking. Oh, I thought you were asking Jess first. Well, I've got an answer for that, and that is, I think there's a difference between an entrepreneur or a small business and then a very large business. The larger the business, the more of a systemic problem you have, because at some point you have investors, and the reason why you're in business is to return, a fair return on your investment. You're in business to give the investors as much money as they possibly can. Well, you go too far in terms of ignoring the customer, and then the line starts to drop down. So you have to be empathetic. You have to do the right things to attract your customer. But if you go overboard, then the bottom line goes down. You're giving less money to your shareholders, and you're not fulfilling your core mission in life. When you're an entrepreneur or small business person, you've got much more latitude to be able to go all over the place. And if you want to be empathetic, you certainly can, and in fact, that gives you a competitive edge. The larger the company, the larger the business, the more difficult it is. You have to maybe call upon something that is inside you. You are just a good person inside, so therefore you might go beyond that minimum empathy that is required for the return on investment for the stockholders.
Well, Scott, you are either extremely empathetic or you're a psychic, because that's a great lead into my next point I want to make, and that being, do you think perhaps, because we talked about the social media, and this comes in that context, social media. We always, use the example of social media taking us back to the village square, where we get to know someone personally. But since, post-war, and especially since the 80s, it seems to me that there has been a movement to take empathy out, consciously take it out of the equation, to be unempathetic, because if you're unempathetic, you don't mind cutting thousands of people out of your company. You don't mind doing slashing and burning, that kind of thing. And that kind of mentality where it's nothing now to chop staff and all that. And that's something that when I was younger, people were very upset when that happened because they could empathize with those families who lost their jobs. But now we had that whole period where it was all about efficiency. You'd fly efficiency counselors in, and they would say, "Oh yeah, you have to get rid of 1/3 of your staff." And now with social media, we've had decades of that kind of mentality. And the stock market, as you mentioned, that's a whole different thing that's playing against being empathetic. So now you have the social media thing, and everybody talking about being social and social marketing, which clashes with that. And maybe that's why people are having an issue with it. And maybe that's why smaller companies are more able to pivot into that kind of role than big companies who are kind of set, especially public companies who have to answer to their shareholders. I'm just throwing that.
Okay, I got to jump in.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jess.
The thing here's the bigger the company, I actually think it's interesting that you say the empathy is taken out and we're all about efficiency or streamlining if we're part of a bigger company because we have to cut jobs. There were some very big macro global economic events that caused companies that were continuing to do things the same way, and they didn't pull their head out of the sand, and then they had to make some really, really tough choices. And I bet you those tough choices were put off by the people who had to make them as long as possible, because we are all human and we hate to see other people in pain. That's just something, I mean, there are a few of us that aren't like that, but in general, the majority of us, we don't want to see people get hurt. And I think we tend to avoid problems or address symptoms or shuffle them to the side instead of dealing with them inside companies until it's too late.
You have a good point, Jess. I mean, the first time I ever fired anybody, I agonized over this.
I still do that.
I was up nights. I kept giving him chances and chances and chances, and finally I said, "I'm sorry, this just is not working out." And you know what he said? "You really should have fired me a long time ago."
So he knew it was coming, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, but I'm talking about people who are so far removed from people.
But I don't think they are. That's the thing.
But there's a whole period there where they were. I mean, I don't know. You have to even watch Wall Street, or isn't there a presidential candidate or someone who wanted to run?
Mitt Romney, lost the election partially because he had a hedge fund that, the business model was to go in to buy an under something or other company, and then
the example I'm talking. Yeah.
Extract the resources, fire people, and then turn it around and make a big profit. And then
dogs on the roof when he went on vacation. It was all over.
Yeah.
So okay, let's get to the second because I love this conversation. I should have to think of this for another show.
There's a Maslow's hierarchy as well. The only reason, or maybe one of the reasons why Apple can be so empathetic is because they're the wealthiest company in the world, and they can afford to do this. They've got they're rolling in so much money.
Not that way.
But
that's very obvious. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Somehow they found that sweet spot. But I'll guarantee you that if over the next 15 years that money dries up and then all of a sudden they've got, huge big problems, that customer service that you really love, that's eventually going to go away.
What's interesting about Apple, and excuse me for taking a little bit of a detour, but they've built such a formidable brand loyalty that people really identify with it. So they don't have to do social media. They don't have to talk, about the brand and how much they care about you and all that, because they show it in their service and in their products. And people really love to be associated with them. I'm sure people probably have tattooed an apple on their ankle. I mean, they know the value of that. So I'd be very surprised if that changed. I think
But there
because
is
that's
an example, and that is Dell. And when Dell took their eye off the donut, and went into the hole, I mean, Michael Dell let his company go down the tubes. People were complaining in droves, including me. I was one of the proponents of Dell hell. I mean, I ended up getting a whole lot of money from that company because of the terrible, shoddy computers they were selling at the time. And Michael Dell had walked out of his company the way that, Steve Jobs was fired at one time. They had to bring him back. And that company still hasn't come back from that because they did not listen.
Okay, so how do we go about being an empathetic company? How do you do that? Because as you said, I mean, it's a company culture thing. So it has to come from the top down. So how do you go about, if you did an analysis of your company and you're thinking we're losing customers here because we're not in touch with them, how do we go about being an empathetic company?
Treat your employees right.
I'm going to bring up Eli's comment here. Romney's lack of empathy went way deeper than vulture capital. 47% anyone. Okay. Because I was trying to think of that person. I don't know whether it was Yahoo or whatever, but she had done a huge slash and burn on the company. And yet she was running on basically humanitarian reasons. So how do you do that? How do you become an empathetic company? Can you transform that without transforming the leadership?
No, I don't think you can.
I don't think you can. And I think the first thing is to look at the vision, mission, and values. Because the vision, mission, and values of a company is going to articulate how much empathy will trickle down, if any at all, would be my thought. And then if you're looking at your middle managers who end up getting all of the things shuffled too, right? The symptoms people don't want to deal with in their company, where they think the problems are because they're the loudest, they're the squeaky wheels that might actually just be indicative of something larger underneath. Those middle managers really need some help, and it's hard to have to deal with that stuff on a regular basis over and over and over again. And really, I think it comes down to problem solving. If you can problem solve, you can recognize, is this something I can fix or not? And then there's some relationship building in here across department, if you will, in the sense that, okay, who do I need to know to help me find a solution that maybe can get this deeper issue fixed? And it can come from other places, but it takes a lot of will and it takes a lot of energy, and we are in a time where we expect fast response. And if we don't get that fast response, we have moved on. And because our customers think that, we as employees and us, when we're in the consumer role, we might think that, but we have to think differently when we're sitting in our role at our computer, behind our desk, or in front of a client, or wherever we happen to be working or not working, because things move slowly. They're not necessarily instantaneous. The front side could look really great, and you're doing a great job if it looks instantaneous. Recognizing there's a whole bunch of work behind the scenes is something that typically gets missed, and we don't give ourselves the time.
Do stores still do ghost shoppers? That kind of thing where you'd hire someone to be a shopper. Because I'm wondering, maybe not just department stores. Maybe all businesses could kind of do that. Have someone, basically walk the steps of a client. Who's this?
I did that in my business.
Michael. Yes, sir, Scott. If a company can afford to have a whole empathy staff in place, then chances are very possible to have quality, resonating empathy practices, and damn, that's expensive.
Plus,
but
okay,
I don't know if I'd have an empathy department.
Right. Because they'll get shuffled aside. I've got that. I'm doing that. We're going to just ignore everything they've got going on. But I'm fitting the role.
Well, it kind of depends on what you want to compete on as well, because you want a competitive edge, and maybe empathy is one way. It might be that you want to compete on price, and even though I love Amazon and I think that they treat their employees really great, the New York Times disagrees with me, and it might be that they can hire drones instead of people, and have very cold warehouses, but boy, I sure like that to be able to purchase from amongst 300 million products and have one of the best prices around.
Well, I think there's a contract when the customer goes to a place for just the price. That's it. You have no kind of emotional connection to a company, but they always have the lowest price. I think in your head, that's a contract that you're signing. I mean, you're saying, I'm not expecting anything else. This is the cheapest place. I'm going to go for the price. Do you think most people fit that demographic?
I think a lot of people do, and I think that that's one of the issues in retail today. But personally, I'd rather pay more and know I'm going to get decent service. You know, I mean, if it's going to be $1 or $2 or $10 more, I'd rather do that knowing that there's somebody on the other side of the phone who's going to help me if I have a problem with their product.
And maybe that's a luxury we have, BL, that maybe that other people don't. You know, because I mean, look at Walmart, who evidently is tanking a bit. They're having some issues with their stock. So I don't know. I mean, you're right, Scott. And maybe we're talking about a certain strata of company that if you're like Dollarama, do you have Dollarama, that kind of thing down there in the States?
Dollar stores.
Kind of dollar stores, yeah. It's called Dollarama here, which is
much cooler.
99-cent stores we have.
Yeah, well, it grew incredibly here. It's like very popular, but that's definitely a store you go to, not for the ambiance when you walk into the store, but you go there because it's cheap. You don't want a connection with the sales staff, God forbid, but you know you go there for it's cheap. So talking about empathy with a company like that maybe kind of doesn't make any sense. Kind of irrelevant. I don't know.
Nonetheless, there was a store like that in my neighborhood, and it just so happened that the guy behind the counter was a really sweet guy, and he did care about what you did. It's about the people that you hire, and it's about the leeway that you give them to make decisions, and most companies don't. And Eli is saying that Amazon Turk's a great place to hire secret shoppers. My experience hiring people to do a whole lot of different things is to go to SAG and AFTRA and hire actors, because they'd much rather do whatever it is you're going to hire them to do than wait on tables. I guarantee it.
What a great idea! I love that. Having been an actor before, what a wonderful idea. You should open an agency, BL. I'll help you. We'll have an agency that you can hire secret shoppers for anything you want. If you have an online company, we'll hire people to go in and subscribe to your.
That'd be fun, don't you think?
That'd be a super idea. I like that.
And you heard it here first, gang. A year from now, it's going to be.
But also, I want to mention, because Eli had also mentioned something here that I think talks to a point that I want to bring up here, is that fast response needs to be baseline now, obviously, because we live in a very fast-paced society, which is why you shouldn't even have a social media profile if you don't answer questions mentioned exactly in a timely manner. And that is so true. And because social media is one of those things that you can use to help your company become empathetic. That's how you get to build relationships with people, hopefully your customers, right? You get to know who they are by their interest. If you go on Google+, you know quickly what their interests are. There's no excuse for not knowing your client other than your priorities are maybe in a different place.
Except for we haven't...
You've got to give people the ability to make decisions to actually be able to help people, even there.
We haven't talked about one big, the elephant in the room maybe, and that's monopolies. Because if you're a monopoly, and I've got a graphic here I'd like to share in the closing minutes of the show. It's Lily Tomlinson and Tomlin. I mean, and what it is that she said the next time you complain about your phone service, why don't you try 2 Dixie cups with a string? We don't care. We don't have to. We're the phone company.
I was mentioning when Scott, I don't know if anybody out there watches Little Britain, which is one of my favorite shows, but I was mentioning to Scott, there's a scene a sketch that they do, and there's this woman behind the counter, which is played by one of the 2 comedians. And basically, it's like every kind of licensed place you go to, or bureaucracy, or travel agency, and the woman, she's behind the desk, kind of like blah blah blah. I'm just punching the clock, kind of thing. And someone comes up, no matter what the problem is, no matter how harried or panicky they are, and they go, "Can you help me? And we need to change this ticket for Bermuda instead of New York." And she looks sort of like she's at the computer all the time doing something at the computer, and she looks up and she goes, "The computer says no." And that's and that's like we go back to this the rationale when in companies, oh no, we can't do that because the budget says no, or no, the programming doesn't allow us to do that.
It's our policy.
Or one time I was at Future Shop and I was saying, really, I had to go up and down the escalator 3 times to just do one exchange. Well, that's kind of how we do the system because it seems the best. I said, well, for who? And that's
the point.
We get locked in the systems. And they don't think about the customer. They're talking about internal systems that benefit them. not us, right?
Well, okay, I'm going to close with this, that just because it benefits them, if they've done it right and they've done their research and they've solved a problem and they know they're solving a problem and not a symptom, the end goal for things like that are because it ultimately helps consumers. Now, if it doesn't, there's some tweaking that can occur, but think about ticketing systems. Think about the do-it-yourself stuff that people have moved to help people help themselves faster.
Oh, there's a special place in hell for that, Jessica.
There is.
I think there's, this whole self-serve thing is just some sort of propaganda they put.
But here's the thing. No, we're going to go over because this is really important, and I think you're right. They thought it would be this magic bullet because that's what they were sold. Customers want to help themselves, so let's put every answer to every customer service problem out there for our people to peruse. They're going to love it. Which is, and I'm like, dude, no, because your problem, BL, is going to be slightly different than Ray's problem, which is going to be slightly different than Scott's problem, and maybe all of them together have a common element, but my particular problem was not solved, and I'm not going to wade through hundreds or even 10 or even 5 options to try and figure out my problem. If I see more than 5, I'm on the phone, and we're trying to find one, and I think that's where customer service or streamlining kind of gets missed. They forget that last step. So how do we use all of this stuff to make a concise, easy way to get people what they want?
That's a perfect example of a company not thinking about in the customer's shoes. Even as simple as websites. Oh, if you want this information, you have to click over here. And click over here if you want to find that, but then go back to this click if or it's like I had this discussion with George because I do most of the grocery shopping, and our grocery store, they had put those self-serve checkouts, which I abhor.
Oh, I hate those.
And because I can never figure them out, and then you end up sending someone over, and by the time, and I'm thinking, something? That might work if you're going to take 10% off my grocery bill, since I'm doing the work for you. But why would I do all this work myself and pay the same amount of money that I would if I had someone else checking that out? I just don't get it, and they think they're doing us a favor. Anyway, we've gone over time, and since we're over time, I just want to give each of you a chance to with a farewell quote or something or advice before we take off. So Jess, BL, we'll start with BL.
Well, I don't think a lot has changed since the days when I did consumer complaints by writing letters to the president. If you don't get an answer right away, and 15 minutes is a dog year in internet time. If you don't get an answer right away, go online, find out who the president is, call the company, ask for the president's office, and somebody there is going to help you if they answer the phone. At Yahoo, they don't.
Nice jab there, BL. Jess.
I don't know how to follow that up. It was perfect, BL. That was perfect.
Scotty. Oh, sorry, Jess.
No, that's okay. It was good. Okay, so I just needed a minute to regroup a little bit in the sense that we know the group of people that we're targeting in our individual businesses or large businesses. We know who those frontline people are, and it's really important to tie the perspectives of every hat in the company to that end consumer, and to do it in a way that makes sense so that what people say they're doing, what people say they want versus what they actually do to get what they want is how a company can respond.
Scotty.
And I'm going to wrap it up just by saying I've got a sneaking idea that the blab that's going to be following this show is going to be lively and very interesting. And I'll go to toss it to you to say a little bit more about what that all means.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so we have a post-show blab, but today I'll be starting at 1 o'clock, which usually is 15 minutes, but now we've gone over, so it's like 10 minutes from now. And we're going to be continuing the conversation, and it could be a continuation of the conversation, or who knows, on blab it tends to go its own way. Hopefully, we try very hard not to talk about blab in our blabs, but that's proving very, very, very difficult. So anyway, I hope you can join us. It's at I'll put it up again just in case you need the link. It's blab.im, Ray Hiltz, and hopefully we'll see you there at 1 o'clock. So thanks everybody. Thanks Michael, and thanks Eli for jumping in with your contribution. That was very, very helpful. And we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye. Oh.